The moment the footage aired, the second Caitlin Clark smiled into that NBC camera like she owned the broadcast, the entire basketball world felt the shockwave. Fans celebrated. NBC executives cheered. But inside the offices of the WNBA, panic, real panic. Because within hours of her appearance, something unprecedented happened behind the scenes. An official warning was issued to Caitlin Clark. A warning that insiders say was so sharp, so pointed, and so laced with frustration, she reportedly didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or walk out of the WNBA altogether. And the wildest part? The warning wasn't about her performance, not about her comments, not about her professionalism. It was about power. Specifically, Caitlin Clark's growing power. The WNBA knows it. The networks know it. The fans know it. Everyone watching the league unfold this season knows it. Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She's a movement, a brand, on a ratings magnet, a one-woman revolution. And NBC's decision to spotlight her so boldly sent a message the WNBA did not want broadcast. She doesn't need the league needs her. Insiders say executives were furious, not annoyed, furious. Because Caitlin Clark showed up on NBC like a superstar, spoke like a superstar, was treated like a superstar. And the WNBA is terrified of losing control of the very person keeping their numbers alive. Not one source leaked. They feel she's becoming bigger than the league and they can't contain it. Another insider said, they wanted to humble her. Instead, she just exposed how desperate they are. But here's the part nobody expected. The warning wasn't just a verbal slap. It came with a threat, a real one, that could change everything about Caitlin's relationship with the WNBA moving forward. A threat that, according to one insider, shows exactly how scared they are of her rising influence. And what Caitlin did next left the league absolutely shaking. Long before the WNBA sent that official warning, long before NBC's cameras triggered a meltdown inside league headquarters, long before Caitlin Clark became the most powerful name in women's sports. There was already a deep, growing tension silently boiling between her and the entire WNBA structure. A tension nobody wanted to acknowledge publicly, but everyone behind the scenes could feel tightening like a rope being pulled at both ends. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the league, she rewired it. From the moment she announced for the draft, the WNBA knew they weren't preparing for a typical rookie. They weren't preparing for another solid prospect, a role player, or even a future star. They were preparing for a cultural event, a phenomenon, a once-in-a-generation force capable of shifting viewership, sponsorships, on media landscapes, ticket sales, everything. And that terrified them. Because the whole league was built on structure, seniority, legacy players, old hierarchies, veteran leadership, and a system that favored paying your dues before earning spotlight. But Caitlin Clark walked in with something the league never had before: global leverage. Networks wanted her. Brands chased her. The NCAA begged her to stay. Her name alone pulled numbers the WNBA could never generate without her. By the time she stepped on a WNBA court, she wasn't a newcomer. She was the face of women's basketball. And that created a quiet resentment that began years ago, back in her college days, but exploded the moment she became the league's biggest star without even trying. Ratings went up, attendance skyrocketed. ESPN pushed her every chance they got. NBC started circling her like she was the key to unlocking a new era of women's sports. Even rival leagues overseas started preparing their offers. And meanwhile, inside the WNBA offices, there was panic, whispers, insecurity, and fear of losing control. Veteran players, many of whom spent over a decade trying to get the league attention, didn't know whether to embrace her, resent her, or pretend she wasn't changing everything they'd worked for. Some loved her impact. Some envied it. Some wanted her to slow down. Some wanted her protected. Others wanted her put in her place. And the league? They were stuck in the middle, being unable to admit the truth publicly. They needed Caitlin Clark more than Caitlin Clark needed them. But things became even more complicated the moment the networks realized this too. NBC's producers understood exactly what they were doing when they reached out. They weren't looking for another player interview. They weren't just filling time. They were making a statement. We choose her. They rolled out the red carpet. They gave her prime airtime. They treated her like LeBron on opening night, and they made sure everyone saw she was the future. The segment aired, and the numbers spiked instantly. NBC executives reportedly celebrated backstage. One insider said, "Her interview outperformed segments that usually require weeks of planning." Another source added, "She's the only athlete who moves numbers like a men's star. NBC knows her value." But the WNBA? They saw something very different. They saw their authority slipping, their influence shrinking, their hierarchy crumbling, their grip on the narrative dissolving in real time. Because what NBC did, what Caitlin Clark unintentionally proved, was that she could step outside the league and still dominate the entire sports world. It made her look untouchable, and it made the WNBA look powerless. As soon as the NBC clip hit social media, league executives reportedly entered emergency damage control mode. Our leaked texts showed phrases like, "She's overshadowing the league." "We need to reassert structure." "This makes us look like we're not in control." "Her image is becoming bigger than the brand." One executive was caught saying, "She's turning into the WNBA's Taylor Swift, and we can't manage that." The resentment that had been bubbling beneath the surface for months suddenly boiled over. Because this wasn't just about a TV segment. This was about power, control, and ownership of the narrative. And the league feared that Caitlin's growing influence could make their own leadership irrelevant. But the real tension didn't start with NBC. It started when Caitlin arrived in the league and the media instantly crowned her the savior of women's basketball. Veterans didn't like that, not because they didn't respect her, but because it highlighted a painful truth. The league had never received this level of attention until Caitlin Clark walked through the door. Players who had been grinding for years watched her get endorsement deals, magazine covers, primetime features, and superstar treatment before she ever played a single professional game. Some players embraced it, others quietly resented it, and a few openly admitted they felt overshadowed. Behind closed doors, coaches whispered to each other, "She's more famous than the league. If she leaves, everything collapses. She's the franchise, not the team." So when NBC gave her that massive spotlight, a spotlight even veteran MVPs never received, the WNBA felt their biggest insecurity exposed on national television. She wasn't just a star. She was the center of gravity. And the league could either adapt or try to humble her. They chose the latter. Within hours of the NBC appearance airing, Caitlin Clark received an official warning from the WNBA, something so rare that even longtime reporters said they'd never heard of a player being reprimanded for a media appearance of this scale. But why did the league react so aggressively? Simple. NBC treated Caitlin Clark like a superstar. The WNBA wants Caitlin Clark treated like a player. And the moment that power dynamic flipped, the league panicked. They want control, but she's becoming uncontrollable. They want hierarchy, but she's disrupting the latter. They want structure, but she's rewriting the structure by merely existing. And the warning they sent her? That was just the first step in their attempt to put her back in line. But Caitlin's reaction to the warning? That's what sent shockwaves through the entire league. Because she didn't bow her head. She didn't apologize. She didn't shrink. She did something that left WNBA executives stunned and scrambling. When the WNBA sent Caitlin Clark that official warning, they expected a rookie reaction: fear, confusion, maybe a quiet apology behind the scenes. They expected her to shrink. They expected her to fall in line. They expected her to play the role the league secretly wanted from her, the face of the WNBA, but not the leader of it. But Caitlin Clark didn't give them any of that. According to insiders, when she received the league's warning email, she read it calmly, took a breath, and then simply said, "Wow." No panic, no meltdown, no rookie fear, just realization. Because for the first time since entering the league, she saw the truth clearly. The WNBA wasn't protecting her. It wasn't supporting her. It wasn't uplifting her as their rising superstar. It was trying to contain her. The warning itself wasn't aggressive, but the tone behind it was unmistakable. Almost like the league was telling her, remember who controls the spotlight. Remember who owns the platform. Yet remember your place. And that is when Caitlin Clark understood the message. She had become too big, too fast, too influential, too essential to the league's survival. And instead of celebrating her success, the WNBA felt threatened by it. But while Caitlin processed the warning quietly, the people around her? Not so quiet. Her team, her camp, her PR advisors, her brand partners? They saw the warning as a direct attack. One insider close to her agency said, "They're scared of her, and they want her popularity, but not her power." Another source went even further. "This is the first time I've seen a league try to humble its biggest star." And the weirdest part? Caitlin's camp warned her months ago that something like this might happen. Even before NBC reached out, her advisors noticed patterns, subtle moves by the league that hinted at discomfort with her explosive rise. Because the WNBA wasn't just reacting to one NBC segment. This tension had been building for months. It started with older players expressing frustration behind the scenes, complaining that Caitlin gets everything handed to her. Even though they knew, deep down, her popularity wasn't manufactured. It was earned through years of highlight reel dominance. Then it escalated when certain teams requested fewer nationally televised games against Caitlin's team, because they didn't want their blowouts or poor attendance numbers compared directly to hers. But the WNBA's true anxiety became visible when networks began competing for Caitlin Clark, not for the league. NBC wanted her for interviews. ESPN wanted her for features. CBS wanted her for crossover segments. Even late-night talk shows lined up for her. Some executives worried. She might become a bigger brand outside the WNBA than inside it. That was the fear. That was the insecurity. Because imagine this. What if Caitlin Clark becomes the first WNBA star whose career is bigger than the league itself? What if she gets sponsorships and media appearances that overshadow entire seasons? What if her brand becomes a global asset while the WNBA still struggles for mainstream recognition? What if she decides, in a few years, to walk away and the league collapses back into obscurity? This wasn't about one interview. It was about control. Because Caitlin Clark is the first player in WNBA history who doesn't need the WNBA to remain globally relevant. That terrified them. And NBC showcasing her like a transcendent superstar was the breaking point. The interviews, the lighting, the production value, the prestige, it made Caitlin Clark look like a premier athlete, like she belonged on the same stage as the pros dominating men's sports. NBC's presentation made one thing painfully obvious. Caitlin Clark had already outgrown the league. And that is why the WNBA executives panicked. But their warning didn't just anger Caitlin's camp. It ignited something in Caitlin too. Because while she didn't clap back publicly, people close to her described the moment she realized, this league doesn't celebrate me. It fears me. And when an athlete reaches that understanding, everything changes. But the WNBA didn't stop there. The warning wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A second, even more shocking move followed the next morning. Multiple insiders claim the WNBA reached out to NBC after Caitlyn's appearance and expressed concerns about the network giving Caitlyn more visibility than the league itself. Some sources even say the league asked NBC to coordinate future appearances more carefully. Translation? Don't let our star look bigger than the WNBA. NBC reportedly refused, politely but firmly. One NBC producer allegedly responded, "We don't schedule our broadcasts around league insecurities. We schedule them around what America wants to see." And America wants to see Caitlyn Clark. That was the moment everything cracked open. Because for the first time, the WNBA saw a future where networks might form direct relationships with Caitlyn, bypassing the league entirely. Imagine that. A WNBA star whose media image the league doesn't control. A WNBA star who can negotiate appearances independent of league approval. A WNBA star who becomes bigger than the WNBA brand itself. No league wants that. The NBA doesn't let rookies overshadow Adam Silver. The NFL doesn't let players negotiate outside media narratives. MLB doesn't let superstars dictate publicity. And the WNBA? They felt Caitlyn's NBC moment was a warning. She is becoming uncontrollable. So what did they do? They doubled down. An anonymous league executive leaked, "This is about maintaining structure. Caitlyn is a phenomenal player, but she must understand the league's hierarchy." Hierarchy. That word hit fans hard because it made the league sound bitter, not supportive. And then came the first major twist. Veteran WNBA players found out about the warning, and many of them were furious. Not at Caitlyn, at the league. Because the warning exposed something embarrassing. The WNBA doesn't know what to do with a superstar. They've never had one at this scale. Not someone every network fights over. Not someone who moves ticket sales like the NBA's top stars. Not someone whose highlights get more views than entire WNBA games. Not the veteran player privately told a reporter, "The league is punishing her for being successful." Another said, "They're jealous of the attention she brings." But one comment, from an unnamed all-star, spread like wildfire. They're trying to control her because they're scared she'll eclipse the league. And that is when things truly exploded. Because not only were veterans upset, sponsors were panicking too. A major brand partner reportedly told the WNBA, "Do not interfere with Caitlyn's media opportunities. She is the reason we increased our investment." Imagine that. Sponsors threatening the WNBA for trying to control Caitlyn Clark. The league was now fighting on all sides. NBC challenging their authority, fans dragging them online, veterans calling them insecure, sponsors warning them to back off, Caitlyn's camp quietly preparing a response. And then the league still didn't understand. The moment they tried to put Caitlyn in her place, they proved she was already bigger than the place they were trying to put her in. But the real twist? Caitlyn Clark had her own message. A subtle, devastating response that left the WNBA scrambling. Because she didn't yell, she didn't tweet, she didn't shade anyone. She made one move. A move that sent shockwaves through the entire sports industry. The morning after Caitlyn Clark received the official warning from the WNBA, everything felt different. The air around her team was tense. Coaches were whispering. Staff members were avoiding eye contact. Phones were buzzing nonstop. PR coordinators were refreshing Twitter like they were monitoring an earthquake. Because the world had already found out. The warning wasn't supposed to leak. But it did. Within hours, the story exploded across social media, sports blogs, highlight channels, on ESPN roundtables, and every corner of the basketball world. Caitlyn Clark wasn't just trending, she was dominating the entire news cycle. WNBA warns star rookie? Caitlyn Clark too big for league? Is the WNBA trying to control her? Insider says Clark was humbled by warning. NBC responds after league pushback. It was chaos, and the WNBA immediately went into panic mode, refusing to comment publicly while desperately trying to figure out how the warning leaked. But here's the twist. It didn't leak by accident. Someone inside the WNBA intentionally released it, to embarrass the league, to expose the jealousy, to reveal the insecurity, to force the public to see the truth. But that wasn't even the big twist. Because while the WNBA scrambled, Caitlin Clark made her move. And it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. She unfollowed 3 major WNBA league accounts. Then she followed NBC Sports and ESPN Women, RSN Sports Illustrated, and a few high-profile journalists known for criticizing the WNBA's leadership. Fans noticed immediately. Caitlin just made a statement. She's telling the league she has options. She's about to expose everything. This girl is done playing nice. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. But the real message came a few hours later. While the WNBA was drafting a private memo reminding teams not to disclose internal disciplinary actions, Caitlin Clark walked into practice wearing an NBC Sports hoodie. A bold, clean, crisp NBC logo plastered across her chest. Like she was saying, "You can't control me, you don't own me, and I'm not scared of you." Teammates saw it, fans saw it, NBC saw it, and the WNBA definitely saw it. One insider said the reaction inside the league office was immediate. They think she's mocking them. Another exec reportedly said, "She's playing with fire." But no, Caitlin wasn't playing. She was sending a message. And the message wasn't just for the league. It was for everyone watching. I don't need your permission to shine. The WNBA underestimated her. They thought she'd respond emotionally. They thought she'd sprint back into line. Instead, she doubled down. Silently, but powerfully. But while fans were celebrating her boldness, something else happened. A video surfaced, a private team meeting, recorded secretly, leaked anonymously, posted for only 14 minutes before it was deleted, but long enough for millions to screen record it. And what the video showed? A WNBA veteran, one of the league's most respected players, slamming her hand on a locker and saying, "I'm tired of this rookie getting special treatment. I'm tired of every network kissing her ass. And I'm tired of the league pretending she's bigger than the rest of us." Another veteran chimed in, "She's turning this into the Caitlin Clark League." The room fell silent. But one voice, unmistakably someone young, whispered, "Because she is." Boom. Twitter detonated. Fans instantly recognized the voices in the clip. People were tagging players. Fans were arguing. Comment sections were on fire. Suddenly, the WNBA's internal resentment was exposed to the world. And the veterans weren't just jealous. They were hostile. But the biggest shock? The league believed Caitlin leaked the video. A WNBA source said, "Executives think this is her way of fighting back." It wasn't her. It wasn't her camp. But the fact that the league thought it was her? That changed everything. Because now, the WNBA started treating Caitlin Clark not as their golden star, but as a threat, a disruptor, a rebel, a woman they could no longer predict or control. And so the league crossed a line they can never walk back. They contacted NBC and allegedly suggested limiting Caitlin's individual appearances for league cohesion. NBC's answer? A flat, unapologetic no. One NBC executive reportedly said, "You have no authority to dictate our talent. Caitlin's visibility is earned." The WNBA was stunned. For the first time ever, a major network had refused to bow to the league's image protection demands. But then came the nuclear moment. NBC leaked something of their own, privately but intentionally. They had offered Caitlin Clark a long-term partnership deal. And outside the WNBA, a deal. A media contract, a broadcasting role, a documentary feature, brand placements, promo opportunities, visibility bonuses, and a clause that would allow her to appear on NBC programming even during the WNBA season. Meaning, the WNBA couldn't limit her exposure. The WNBA couldn't override NBC. The WNBA couldn't control her narrative. She would become the first WNBA athlete with independent media power beyond the league's jurisdiction. And that is what sent the league into full-on meltdown. Because if Caitlin Clark signs with NBC officially, she becomes uncontainable, a superstar with a platform the league doesn't manage, a public figure who can speak directly to millions without WNBA approval, a player whose influence surpasses the league's own reach. In the WNBA knew they had lost control when one terrified exec said, "If she partners with NBC, she'll be bigger than the WNBA itself." Too late. Caitlin's agent confirmed the meeting with NBC. Sponsors began lining up, and analysts started predicting a future where Caitlin Clark becomes the face of American women's sports, not just WNBA basketball. But just when the league thought things couldn't get worse, Caitlin Clark did something no one predicted. In her next press conference, while the world watched, she paused mid-interview, smiled slightly, and said, "I won't be silenced, that's all I'll say." 7 words. 7 words that hit harder than any dunk, any crossover, any buzzer beater. Fans erupted, media erupted, NBC erupted, the WNBA panicked. Because that one line wasn't a response. It was a declaration, a manifesto, a warning. And the league knew. They were losing control of their biggest asset and their biggest threat. But then came the real shocker. Something far more explosive than NBC. Something the league never prepared for. Something that would change Caitlin Clark's future. And the future of the WNBA forever. The second Caitlin Clark said those 7 words, "I won't be silenced, that's all I'll say," the sports world cracked open like a fault line snapping under pressure. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't rebellious in tone. But it was defiant in meaning. And everybody understood it instantly. Caitlin Clark was no longer playing the WNBA's game. She was playing her own. The public reaction was immediate and unlike anything the WNBA had ever seen. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everything was flooded with reactions, debates, fan edits, highlight compilations, conspiracy threads, and full-on cultural commentary. Sayaka Caitlin said enough is enough. She knows the league tried to humble her. WNBA can't silence the woman feeding the stadiums. That warning backfired so hard. The hashtag Let Caitlin Speak went viral within an hour. But the reactions weren't just from fans. They were from every corner of the sports industry. ESPN analysts debated the warning on live TV, with one panelist saying, "This is the first time I've ever seen a league so threatened by its own rising star." Another responded sharply, "The WNBA is losing control, and Caitlin is forcing them to evolve." Sports journalists wrote entire multi-page think pieces arguing whether the WNBA was sabotaging itself by pushing back against the one player keeping its viewership alive. But the real shock came when former NBA legends chimed in. Shaq said on his podcast, "You never try to dim your brightest light. That's a mistake. Caitlin is changing the game. Let her." Charles Barkley added, "The WNBA should be thanking her, not warning her." Even LeBron reacted subtly by reposting a Caitlin Clark highlight clip with the caption, "Let greatness shine." That post alone sparked millions of comments. The NBA is on her side? WNBA losing the narrative fast. Ooh, this is about to get nasty. But the wildest responses came from WNBA veterans themselves, because they were split straight down the middle. Some players defended Caitlin. "She's growing our league. Why are we punishing success?" We need her. She moves crowds. She's the reason little girls watch us now. Others stood firmly against her. Respect the league before you go to NBC. She's not bigger than the WNBA. Her attitude is dangerous for the culture. One veteran star even tweeted, "We built this foundation. She's walking on it." Fans fired back instantly. You built the foundation, but she brought the audience. Jealousy is loud. Blaming Caitlyn for being more marketable is crazy. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just facing criticism. It was facing a civil war. Players turning on players, fans turning on veterans, veterans turning on the league, networks turning on the league, sponsors watching nervously. It was the worst PR storm the WNBA had ever seen, and sponsorship executives were not staying quiet. One prominent corporate partner leaked, "If Caitlyn is being limited, our renewal discussions will be affected." That alone caused tremors within the WNBA boardrooms, and brands don't threaten leagues unless they feel their money is at risk. But things got even more explosive when NBC itself entered the conversation. Indirectly, but unmistakably. An NBC spokesperson, responding to a reporter, said, "Caitlyn Clark's voice is important, and we will always provide a platform for athletes whose impact goes beyond the court." That comment was interpreted in one way and one way only. NBC was publicly siding with Caitlyn Clark over the WNBA, and league executives were furious. Sponsors were divided. Fans were emboldened. But then came the most delicate and dangerous reaction. College coaches from Iowa and other major programs began speaking out. One coach said, "This is why players stay in college longer. The WNBA is scared of change." Another added, "Women's basketball is thriving because of Caitlyn, not in spite of her." Even younger NCAA players chimed in. "She's our inspiration. The WNBA should be building around her. You're not boxing her in." Suddenly, the WNBA looked like the villain, and Caitlyn Clark looked like the revolutionary. But the league wasn't done embarrassing itself. Hours later, a leaked internal memo hit social media. It said, "All players should coordinate external media appearances with the league to ensure messaging remains consistent with WNBA values." Fans immediately interpreted that as, "We want control. We want censorship. We want our players quiet. We want Caitlyn contained." And then something happened that the WNBA never anticipated. NBA players, active ones, started speaking up. Trae Young tweeted, "These warnings are weird. I'd let the stars grow the game." Damian Lillard wrote, "Imagine warning a rookie for bringing more eyeballs to your league." But it was Stephen Curry's comment that broke the internet. "Caitlyn Clark is special. Don't clip her wings." That line became a full-blown movement. "Don't clip her wings" trended for 8 hours. TikTok filled with edits, slow-motion highlights of Caitlyn with dramatic music, clips of her NBC appearance with inspirational quotes, and side-by-side comparisons of WNBA attendance before and after her arrival. The narrative was clear. The fans chose Caitlyn. The networks chose Caitlyn. The NBA chose Caitlyn. Even half the WNBA chose Caitlyn. The only ones standing against her were the ones terrified of losing power. But the industry reaction wasn't the end. Because as the fan base rallied behind Caitlyn, something much more dangerous was brewing quietly behind the scenes. A rumor, a whisper, and a story that began circulating among insiders, executives, and media producers. A rumor that the WNBA had considered, behind closed doors, taking disciplinary action against Caitlyn Clark beyond just the warning. Something that would have shaken the league to its core. Something so drastic that sponsors would revolt, networks would riot, and the fan base would burn the league to the ground. A punishment, a silencing attempt, a move so extreme it could end the WNBA's credibility forever. But before that plan could leak publicly, Caitlin Clark herself made a damaging discovery. Something hidden, something personal, something that proved the warning wasn't just professional tension. It was targeted, intentional, and aimed at her specifically. As the WNBA battled fans, sponsors, players, and networks all at once, Caitlin Clark stayed unusually quiet. No interviews, no rants, no emojis, nothing. Everyone assumed she was cooling off. They were wrong. She was investigating. And because the warning email didn't sit right with her. The tone felt off. The language didn't sound like the usual WNBA communications office. And the timing, hitting her inbox just hours after her NBC appearance, felt too fast, too aggressive, too emotional to be official protocol. So Caitlin showed the email to someone she trusted, a former league employee who now works in the private sector. He took one look at it and froze. "This doesn't look like standard league language," he told her. "This wasn't written by the communications team." Caitlin frowned. Then he added, "This came from someone higher. Higher than communications? Higher than the PR department?" "The executive office," he whispered. But Caitlin's advisor shook her head. "No, this feels personal. Personal." And that word hit Caitlin like a gut punch. Because everything suddenly started clicking. The speed of the warning, the tone of the memo, the unnecessary harshness, the sudden shift in treatment, and the league's desperation to control her media presence, the internal memo telling players to keep messaging consistent. This wasn't policy. This was targeting. Someone specific wanted Caitlin Clark checked. But who? And why? That night, Caitlin's advisor pulled something shocking. Metadata. Every digital document carries hidden metadata, showing when it was created, who authored it, and what device it came from. The advisor scanned the warning email, and the results made his face go pale. "Yes, Caitlin, this wasn't written by the department head. Okay? And it wasn't written by the commissioner either." "Then who wrote it?" He hesitated, then showed her the screen. A name appeared. A name Caitlin recognized. A name she never expected. A name that made her heartbeat drop instantly. It was a current WNBA executive who is closely connected to a veteran player who has openly expressed resentment toward Caitlin's popularity. A veteran Caitlin has publicly clashed with before. A veteran who felt overshadowed the moment Caitlin stepped into the league. A veteran who allegedly said behind closed doors, "She's not going to come in here and take everything we built." The WNBA warning wasn't a league action. It was a personal attack disguised as an official letter, a targeted move, an intentional humiliation, a calculated attempt to put Caitlin in her place by a woman in power. And that was just the beginning, because the metadata revealed something even more explosive. The email draft existed before Caitlin's NBC interview even aired. Hours before. Meaning, they were planning to warn her no matter what she said. They were prepared to punish her before the segment even happened. They had already decided to humble her. Caitlin felt sick. This wasn't disciplinary action. This was sabotage, a quiet war, a premeditated strike. Ahorita a message, "You are not bigger than us." But the real explosion came when Caitlin dug deeper. Because the file history showed something terrifying. The executive who wrote the warning had previously edited internal documents regarding discipline procedures. She had access to confidential messaging channels. She had the power to manipulate internal policy drafts. She had the authority to fake official tone. And then, Caitlin found a second document. A draft. Not the draft not meant for her eyes. An unreleased internal memo that read, "If player continues independent media activity without league approval, potential suspension guidelines may be considered." Suspension. They were planning to suspend her. The WNBA's biggest draw. their #1 ticket seller, their top ratings magnet, their most recognizable player worldwide. And worse, the draft was dated 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks before NBC, 2 weeks before the warning, 2 weeks before any controversy. Now they were always preparing to hit her. The targeting wasn't about NBC, it was about control. Because Caitlin Clark did the one thing the WNBA was terrified of. She became bigger than the league. And now, with proof in her hands, Caitlin Clark had the power to blow the entire WNBA leadership structure apart. Her advisor stared at the documents and said quietly, "If this goes public, the league collapses." But before Caitlin could decide what to do with the information, something happened. Something unexpected, something explosive, something that changed everything. A major sports outlet, without naming names, posted, "A massive WNBA scandal is about to break. Sources say a top rookie was targeted by league executives. This could be the biggest controversy in WNBA history." The comments went insane. "It's about Caitlin. Leak it. Drop the names." I knew the WNBA was jealous. The rumor was spreading. Fast, too fast. Then Caitlin's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "You found the documents. Be careful. Someone inside the league is coming for you next." Caitlin's eyes widened. Before she could respond, a second message appeared. "They're planning something for the next game." What plan? Who sent the warning? Who inside the WNBA was sabotaging her? And what were they planning next? The cliffhanger hangs right here. Because Caitlin Clark is about to walk into a game with a target on her back and no idea who is pulling the strings. If you're still watching right now, then you already know the truth the WNBA hoped would never leak. Caitlin Clark isn't just fighting for spotlight. She's fighting for freedom inside a system that was never prepared for someone like her. A rookie shouldn't have to dig through metadata. A rookie shouldn't have to uncover sabotage. Being a rookie shouldn't have to expose executives hiding behind fake official warnings. A rookie shouldn't need protection from her own league. And yet, that's exactly where Caitlin Clark stands today. She didn't choose this war. The WNBA brought it to her doorstep. But now it's your turn to weigh in. Because this story is bigger than basketball. It's bigger than NBC. It's bigger than one warning email. This is about an entire generation of fans watching a league try to dim the brightest star it has ever had. So right now, jump into the comments and answer this. Do you think the WNBA intentionally targeted Caitlin Clark? Do you think that executives should be exposed publicly? Do you think the league is jealous of Caitlin's popularity? Do you think her suspension was already being planned behind the scenes? Do you think the veteran player connected to the exec pushed for this? Should Caitlin go public with the leaked draft documents? Should NBC step in and defend her? Should Caitlin leave the WNBA entirely? And here's the biggest question. What do you think the league is planning for her next game? A setup? A storyline? A mistake that turns into punishment? Or something even darker behind the scenes? Drop your theories. All of them. No guess is too wild. No angle is too dramatic. This comment section should look like a crime investigation board when you're done. Because trust me, the next chapter of this story is going to be worse. Way worse. We're talking career-changing, league-shaking, history-rewriting revelations. And you do not want to miss what's coming. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn on all notifications, and buckle up. Because the documents Caitlin found are just the beginning of a much bigger conspiracy. The WNBA thought they could silence her. Now the entire world is watching.